Who killed Jeffrey Epstein?
Billionaire, hedge fund manager, socialite.
Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Epstein took his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City, facing charges of sex trafficking.
It was pretty obvious that he was taken out. You talk to or you listen to people who've been in those cells who say it was impossible to commit suicide in those cells. They revealed the footage from the prison and there's bits missing, and none of it makes sense because none of it is true. But in terms of who was behind it specifically, in the end, it's the shadow people you never see that make these things happen.
With as much specificity as possible, like how do we identify the shadows?
You can visualize it as it is a web around the planet. And all these different strands in the web are either secret societies, public organizations, they're governments, they're banks, they're corporations. And in the middle of the web is
David Icke. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you making time.
No problem.
Who killed Jeffrey Epstein?
It's clear someone did. And so you have to then look at what was the situation. Like I said earlier, everyone is expendable. And, there are some who believe he's still alive and it was all a scam and he's, somewhere else and maybe had a face change. I don't know. I wouldn't rule anything out with these people. But on the face of it, he was.
When you say these people with as much specificity as possible, who are these people?
They are basically agents and gophers of this global cult, and which is orchestrating it all, and to whom everybody that serves it is expendable. So. The reason Savile was never taken out is because he was considered safe. And he was. And they watched his back because if he went down, lots of these people went down with him. And so you had a situation with Epstein where he's in this jail in New York and he's awaiting trial. Which would have generated enormous amounts of publicity, obviously, and questions. And then suddenly he's not alive anymore. So it was pretty obvious that he was taken out. Exactly by whom, on exactly whose say so. We don't know that. But you
what's your best guess?
You talk to. Or you listen to people who've been in those cells who say it was impossible to commit suicide in those cells. And you had the two guys who fell asleep and all that stuff. So, they revealed the footage of from the prison of his door or whatever. And there's bits missing, and none of it makes sense because none of it is true. But in terms of who was behind it specifically, well, look at who had most to lose. But in the end, it's the shadow people you never see that make these things happen. If you could see them in the public arena, I don't care if they're Jimmy Savile or Donald Trump or Jeffrey Epstein, they're still gophers. The shadow is where the shadows is where it's all coming from. And, so you have Obama in office and you have Biden in office, Democrats, and you have Trump in office, Republican. But they come and go. They're here today, gone tomorrow, politicians. But the shadow people are always there. And they're the ones that are driving it.
Are the shadow people labelless, titleless, ineffable? Or is it Bilderberg Group? Is it World Economic Forum? Is it Freemasons? Is it reptile people? Is that all different words for the same thing? with as much specificity as possible, like how do we identify the shadows?
It's all in the end the same network if you go deep enough. How I describe it, this global cult, is you can visualize it as a spider's web around the planet, and all these different strands in the web are either secret societies, semi-secret groups, by which I mean they're known if you want to do the modicum of research, but you don't know what they do outside of the public eye. And others are in the web are public organizations, their governments, their financial operations, their banks, their corporations. And in the middle of the web is what I call the spider. And that spider ultimately is not even in this dimension, it's in another dimension, what people call the astral dimension. These are the so-called gods of the ancient world. If you look around the ancient world, you find pantheons of gods everywhere, called under different names, but you don't do enough research and you realize they're talking about the same entities. And the strands in the web in this reality are the most, around the spider, are the most exclusive secret societies. And they won't often have names. It makes them very, very difficult to track. And as you come out from the spider, you then hit this part of the web, still in the hidden, where you see the secret societies we do know about. That's where you get the Freemasons. That's where you get the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, the inner core of the Jesuit order, and so on. The Skull and Bones Society in America, outside Yale University, of which people like Father George Bush, President, and Boy George Bush, President, were initiates. And their job, the hidden part of the web, is to take this this agenda, which is coming from the spider, out into the wider world. So you're coming out through these secret societies, which are themselves fiercely compartmentalized. People say, well, too many people would know. No, they wouldn't. I mean, if you look at the Freemasons, for instance, the Scottish rite of Freemasonry is 33 degrees, and you only go into a higher degree when the degree above says you can. So you have a built-in filter. And even when you get to the 33rd degree, there are other degrees above that that only the chosen few get into, and people in the first 33 degrees have no idea they even exist. And the most Freemasons in the world are in the bottom three levels of degree, the so-called blue degrees. They never go any higher. And I've talked to Freemasons who've got out of it, and I've read books by Freemasons who've got out of it, and they had no idea until a long time later what they were part of. They thought it was one thing when they realized eventually, few of them, that it was something very different. So the whole, intelligence agency theme of the need to know, you only need to know what you need to know to play your part without knowing the big picture. All these secret societies work on that basis. And then you come to the point in the web that I call the cusp in the web. This is where the hidden part of the web meets the seen. And in that cusp, you have the World Economic Forum, formerly run by Klaus Schwab. You have the Bilderberg Group. You have the Council on Foreign Relations. You have the Trilateral Commission. You have the Club of Rome that was established in 1968 to use the environment and environmental concerns as a justification of the centralization of global power. That's where, and with other environmental groups, the whole global warming thing came from. And also in that cusp part of the web, you have all these non-governmental organizations, many of the big ones funded by George Soros, and you have think tanks. And their job, although most of them in it don't realize that this way that manipulation works, their job is to take the agenda for the world from the spider coming out of the hidden and to play it out in the public arena through governments, government agencies, corporations, etc., banking systems. And so if you then look from this perspective at the world that we see, there appears to be endless organizations, and they don't seem to be connected. But if you go deep enough in them, you reach that point where they attach to the web. And at that point, they are the same organization pursuing the same agenda. So during COVID, for instance, you had Silicon Valley internet platforms and corporations defending through vehement censorship, I do know from personal experience, the version of COVID that was being put out by the World Health Organization and through them governments. If you were pointing out that it was a scam and why, then you were censored. I was thrown off all of them. And on the face of it, you think, well, hold on a minute. These platforms are supposed to be the town square. We're supposed to be sharing opinions and information. What's going on? Well, what was going on is that if you go deep enough in these platforms, your Facebooks and your Googles and your YouTubes, etc., you hit that level that attaches to the web. And you do the same with the World Health Organization, which is overseen by Gates on behalf of the Rockefellers who created it in 1948. And you'll find the same. And so at that level, you've got the web in the form of Silicon Valley corporations defending the narrative of the World Health Organization, which is another part of the web. And then you'll see, again, during COVID, you saw the Pfizers and the Modernas and Johnson and Johnsons, etc. They were going to what's supposed to be public protection organizations from the big pharma cartel, people like the CDC in America and the FDA and the MHRA in Britain. And they were asking for permission to use this fake vaccine, not even a vaccine by previous criteria and definitions, to more and more people and younger people. And they were getting it again and again and again. There was no protection of the public from big pharma. Why? Because if you go deep enough in big pharma, and again, that was created by the Rockefellers, you hit the web. You'd have to go very deep in that. And you go deep enough in the FDA and the CDC, and you do the same. And so again, you've got the web giving permission to the web to use a creation of the web, which was the fake vaccines, which have created, of course, mayhem in terms of health and death around the world, and much else besides. So this is how the web works, and deep in the shadows are those that are orchestrating it, but you won't see them on public display. What you see is the gophers. So you look at Bill Gates; he's still a gopher. He's extraordinarily rich and influential, but he's a gopher. And if he wasn't doing what he's doing on behalf of the web, then he wouldn't be half as rich, and he wouldn't have his back watched. I mean, okay, so the MAGA were going on and on and on about how bad Bill Gates was and what he was doing. And Trump was encouraging them, like he was encouraging them about Hillary Clinton in his first campaign. And then on Inauguration Day, in his first campaign, at the inauguration dinner, Trump is making a speech and pays tribute to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton on one of the tables, and says how wonderful they are and how he's got great respect for them. And he's pushing this jail Hillary chant through his campaign. So when you get down to the bottom line of the entire conspiracy, it's control of perception. That's it. Everything is about control of perception. So if you look at 8 billion people, the number of those in full knowledge of what they're doing in advancing this dystopia are tiny beyond measure compared with the 8 billion. So what they want to do is, and we're seeing the moves to that happening very quickly, they want to fuse humans, the human brain, with artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence becomes the human mind and emotional response, and then they gotcha. That's what they want to do. But up to this point, though it's diminishing fast at the moment, they can't enforce themselves on 8 billion people. They can't. So what they have to do is control the perceptions of people, which leads to the behavior of people. We behave as we do because we perceive as we do. So if you take again the COVID example, people went meekly under house arrest and put their little masks on because they were persuaded that there was a deadly virus. And if they weren't persuaded, then they were intimidated into doing it anyway for fear of not doing it. And so the goal is control of perception. And so if you look at how the MAGA have behaved in their support of Trump, it's because of their perception of Trump. And what's hit a lot of people with not the inner core, that's a cult, but and he's the cult leader, he's the Jim Jones. But a lot of the soft support for Trump that got him in is now walking away because their perception of him has been changed by this Epstein situation that we're seeing unfold. But it's all about perception. So what do you have to do to control perception? Well, first of all, it would be great. I tell you what, this would be great. I don't know if they'd accept it, but it would be great. What we do is we take their children from a very early age and we put them under our indoctrination machine at least 5 days a week, plus homework, for all their formative years. And we give them a version of reality through constant repetition. And the other thing that would be great is if we controlled the media where people got their information from in the adult world and kids as well. Because then we would control what people received as information from which they form their perceptions, which dictate their behavior. And this is this is why we are seeing ever more extreme censorship and why we saw it dramatically during the COVID period, it's because if you are allowing the free flow of information, i.e., during COVID, the evidence that it was a scam, then you're allowing information to flow that could give people a different perception of the situation, the one you don't want them to have. So you censor them. And that's what censorship is all about. It's controlling the perceptions of the people. And one of the things I've been going on about since COVID is how the so much of the alternative media, what you might now call the MAGA media, has been hijacked by people formerly in the mainstream who've come in. And what they've done is held the line at the political system. They've gone from what we knew before, which is that we live in one-party states and masquerading as political choice. And now they've gone back to the two-party puppet show, and we have people saying who should know better and said something different before, that the deep state is the Democrats. No, it's not. It's all of them. Political parties are part of the illusion. Certainly part of the illusion of choice, political choice. And so there's been massive censorship, even in the alternative media. And I was watching Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, and Donald Trump today in that meeting in Scotland. And there's a lot of people saying, oh, Trump was calling him out for lack of freedom of speech. But you look at what Trump has done since he came to power, targeting the freedom of speech of those who are calling out Gaza, targeting media organizations with massive lawsuits for editing a Kamala Harris interview in a certain way, even though he won, and they paid up. And you look at all the other targeting of the media in its different forms, that which doesn't support Trump. And the last thing that he's about is freedom of speech, and neither is Keir Starmer. But what you've seen is, just today, is people saying, oh, Trump, he's a free speech, he's in favor of free speech. No, he's not. He's calling out Starmer. No, they're both anti-free speech. That's the point. It's just that one goes against free speech while claiming to stand for it. And the other one is using protecting children from the internet to censor everybody. But the outcome is the same, censorship. And it's when you realize that what you see as different is actually ultimately the same, that's when the penny drops and you start to see it for what it is. Because you go deep enough into the Democrats and you'll hit the web. You go deep enough into the Republicans, you'll hit the web. It's the same in this country with your Labour Party, the Conservative Party, and your Nigel Farage Reform Party. And this is why in this period since COVID, that the central core, there's some great people in the alternative media doing some great work. I'm talking about this central core that gets all the algorithmic support and the funding. They have done a tremendous disservice by regressing the expansion of awareness of the scale of it, now it works, to, oh, no, it's the Democrats.
It seems, so if we cannot use the term they in the conversation for at least like a moment, if there was no usage of the term they, and we had to have specificity, can we not have specificity? Because it sounds almost like there's like a spiritual lens on this, where a lot of this is being governed in a paranormal way. And we have the perception of people and entities, but in fact, there's an energetic component beyond that that is pulling the strings. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. When I started uncovering the cult and how it worked in the early 1990s, long time ago now, by about the mid 1990s, I started to realize the pedophilia, Satanism connection, where so many of the people I was investigating ended up with pedophilia and Satanism. I mean, one of the people that I highlighted was a guy called Ted Heath, who was Prime Minister of Britain, and he was the one that took us into the European Union. And so when you realize that people who you see on CNN or the BBC or whatever are involved in satanic ritual and pedophilia, then you start to ask a simple question, of course: why? Why do they do it? And if you take the Satanism, well, you then start to look back into history. And I've talked to people all over the world who've taken part in satanic rituals, often against their will, and some who eventually saw the light. And they have described how the rituals work. And I'm talking human sacrifice rituals, often as kids, involving kids, by the way. And what they're describing is what back in the ancient world was done openly. They're making offerings to the gods. So, what bloody gods? And also, another question: what do the gods get out of this? So then you start to realize that these pantheons of gods, like I said earlier, are worshipped all over the world, in every community, every era in the ancient world, under different names. But you look at then in detail at the way they're described, and they're describing the same entities. I mean, we know about the Greek pantheon with Zeus and the others, but the same applies all over the place. In every community and every era and every culture, there's these gods. In places like the East, they still worship them under things like Hinduism, multiple gods. But what's happened with other religions is they've fused what were before multiple gods into one God. And you realize as you research this, and like I've been doing it now for 35 years, or into be 36 now, that these people in the world today that are taking part in all this are actually worshipping, making offerings to the same, quote, gods that they were in the ancient world. And these gods are in the astral dimension, which interpenetrates this reality. But one of the things that I've said over and over, that every child should be told at the first moment they can grasp it, is that when they look through their eyes, they're not seeing everything in the space they're looking at. They're only seeing a tiny band of frequency, which science calls visible light. And that band of frequency is so tiny, it's insane. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is basically our experienced reality, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe in terms of energy in its different forms. Some say it's as high as 0.5, but it's tiny, whatever. And visible light, the only band of frequency that we can see, is a smear of the 0.005%. So when you look through your eyes, you're not seeing everything in the space you're looking at. You're seeing a smear of what's happening in the space you're looking at. And so this astral dimension interpenetrates this one, just like the old analog television stations and radio stations were on different wavelengths and didn't interfere with each other, even though they shared the same space, unless they were very close on the dial. And where they are, the levels of this astral are close to this one on the dial, that's where you get ghost activity, etc. Where you start, some people anyway, can start to see something of it. But overwhelmingly, we don't, because it's on another wavelength, another band of frequency. And so when you're getting people who say they saw a UFO appear out of nowhere, or they disappear into nowhere, or an entity appeared out of nowhere and then went into nowhere, people say they're crazy. It's not possible. Of course it's possible. What they do is they enter visible light, and to you, the observer, it's come out of nowhere. They leave visible light. To you, the observer, it's disappeared into nowhere. It hasn't disappeared at all. It's just left the tiny band of frequency that you can see. So these entities are operating on a band of frequency that interpenetrate this one. And these rituals, especially when they're done in the same place over and over and over, they create vortices, and often they'll do it on natural vortices, where the vortex thins out the frequency difference between the entity's dimension and this dimension. And many times I've had described to me by people who've taken part in these rituals how in the major rituals anyway, entities just appear out of the ether that are not human. And from what they tell me, the Satanists in this world that are taking part in the ritual are absolutely terrified of them. And what you've got is a pyramid, a hierarchy of fear. The whole thing's run by fear. There's a reason to that. I'll come to. So the population overwhelmingly acquiesces to authority because it doesn't question, but often because it's frightened of not acquiescing. And then you've got that level of authority imposing the will on the population that's frightened of the level above that, that's frightened of the level above that. And eventually you get to the inner core of this global cult. And that is terrified of these astral, quote, gods, not gods at all. They're a bunch of prats, but they're perceived as that. And so it's that astral level that is driving the dystopia. So why do they take part in satanic rituals? What do the gods get out of it? Well, you start to realize as you research this, and my goodness me, you have to research so many bloody subjects to put this together, which of course the central core of the alternative media doesn't do. It's all Trump or Harris. But when you do, you realize that actually these entities are feeding off human low vibrational energy. It's well known in science that every time we think and every time we feel emotion, we're generating frequencies. And those frequencies relate to the nature of the thought and the nature of the emotion. So, love, joy, appreciation, these are all high frequencies. And depression and fear, the big one, and regret and anxiety, these are all low frequencies. And it's the low frequencies these entities want, because you don't do what they do if you're a high frequency. You just don't, because that's a completely different perception of the world. And so they have no interest in this world being one of love and joy, harmony and balance and peace. They want upheavals, constant upheavals, war, conflict, suffering, deprivation. They want that divide and rule. They want that all the time because it generates the energy that they absorb. And it's like Morpheus in the Matrix when he held up the battery and said that the Matrix is a computer-generated dream world designed to turn humans into one of these, a battery. And basically, that's the foundation of it. So, in general, if you look at known human history, the amount of this energy, what some people who research this call loosh energy, it's low vibrational energy. We've been generating it en masse throughout known human history and on a massive scale now, with people. But also, that's the gift to the gods, because when they're putting the sacrifice, like I say, often kids, there's a reason for that, through the horrors, that they are generating enormous levels of terror, which is a really powerful low vibrational energy. And you can, when you look at someone who's in an emotional state, you can see that they're in an emotional state because of their body language, their facial expressions, whatever. What you're not seeing, because it's outside visible light, is the energy that's coming off them as a result of those mental and emotional states. That's going into what we call the astral. And the astral entities are feeding off it. And another part of this process, horrible as it is that when you're generating that level of terror, adrenaline enters the blood. And that's where adrenochrome and all this stuff comes from that people talk about.
What is adrenochrome, and who finds adrenochrome useful?
Well, adrenochrome is when this adrenaline enters the blood. I've had it described to me by Satanists who've taken part in these rituals, how while the entities are feeding off the energetic level of the terror, that the Satanists in our reality are drinking the blood, because this adrenaline gives them a kind of a high. It's like a drug to them, because they're very, very disturbed people. So you start to realize.
Is this from children? Is this where the adrenochrome is coming from?
Well, it comes from anybody that goes through that terror. But the reason that they have such a focus on children, which I came across a long time ago now, is because for some reason, these entities want a child's energy before puberty. So when you look at puberty, it appears to be a chemical hormonal change. But that chemical hormonal change is an expression of an energetic frequency change that's taking place in their energetic field. And they want that energy before that change takes place. It's something they crave for some reason.
And they is astral entities. If we can't use the term they, what if there had to be a label outside of they, is the label astral entities? And is there any way to be more specific than that?
Well, if you look at a common theme throughout religions and ancient cultures, it's this, that this world is manipulated by a force, entities, from in the unseen, and they're given different names. And the Gnostic belief system calls them archons, which is Greek for rulers. And they talk about an entity that oversees those archons, rulers, which they call Yaldabaoth. Also, they call it the demiurge. And then you look at other, but take religions. You look at the demons of Christianity and the Satan devil symbolism. Then you look at Islam and you see the jinn. All these are entities that operate outside of the visible light frequency. I remember being in New York once when I was, long time ago now, when I was researching the archons and the Gnostic side of it. And I was in this taxi. It was a Muslim taxi driver taking me from New York airport, Kennedy Airport, to the city. And he said to me, "What are you doing these days? What you researching?" And I told him, I said, about these archons, and I described them. And he said, "Oh, that sounds just like the jinn." Well, yeah, because they're basically talking about the same thing. And but these are entities that operate in the astral, so you don't see them, but they can take human form. And in the Gnostic writings that were found at a place called Nagamadi in 1945, about 80 miles north of Luxor in Egypt, they talk about these archons. About a fifth of the writings that were found are about the archons and how they control human society from the hidden. And they are describing in their own way what someone following Islam would describe in terms of the jinn. And what these Gnostic writings say is that when these archons take form, because they talk about them being, in the end, an energy, a consciousness, but they can take form, they describe them. And, it's estimated that these Nagamadi writings and documents were put in the earthen jar they were found in 1945, around 400 AD. So a long time ago. But in these writings, they're talking about how these archons take form massively in a serpentine form, and as they describe it, like a grey fetus with big black eyes, which is a fair description of what people call the Greys. And so one of the greatest ways of controlling people and controlling the perceptions of people is to squeeze, as much as you can, the perception of the possible. So you only let them, by them I mean the population, have general access to a very limited level of possibility. Because then when someone comes along and says, this is what's going on, they will just reflex action reject it by reflex action, because it's beyond their limit of the possible. And there's a brilliant phrase that someone came up with a long time ago, which went along the lines of people, they basically misunderstand the limits of their own mind with the limits of possibility. And people are doing that all the time, rejecting what people say about something because it's outside of their perception of the possible. This is systematic. What we have in the human world is two worlds, basically. You've got the world of the cult, which at its inner core is passing on through the generations highly advanced knowledge, of course, of the agenda for humanity towards this ever greater dystopia. But crucially, what's passed on is the nature of reality and how it really works. At the same time, the cult, through its various front people like the Rockefellers and J.D. Rockefeller, etc., they have created the means of communication in the human world. The Rockefellers created the American education system, for instance. Bill Gates, a Rockefeller gopher, is very much involved in that to this day. And the cult has created the media, and they own the media. Fewer and fewer corporations own the mainstream media now. And this same cult has taken over swathes of the alternative media as well to serve its interests. So what you've got is this advanced knowledge being passed on through the hidden in the cult, particularly the inner core levels of it. And at the same time, that has created the means of communication from which people form their perceptions among the population. And those that information is squeezed to limit the sense of the possible of the population. And because, when I've said to so many people over the years, can you see everything there is to see when you look into a space? And people say, yes, of course I can. So how many people know that they're actually seeing a tiny band of frequency? Comparatively, not many. But without understanding that, you cannot understand. Because people say to me, well, if these entities exist, why can't we see them? Well, you can hardly see anything. That's the point. And so this is a massive part of the control of humanity, is controlling the sense of the possible.
Yeah, a lot of this would be tossed away by Western culture, but if you were to communicate like this to a person steeped in a shamanic worldview or a mystic worldview or something of the sort, they would be very much, of course, it's like I deal with these worlds every day, and it's very real for them. And if I was looking up the visible light spectrum, we see 380 nanometers to 750 nanometers, which is 0.01% of what we could possibly see in electromagnetic radiation. And then the auditory spectrum as well is 20 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz, which is 0.002 of the potential acoustic frequency range. And it feels very audacious and ignorant, I think, or arrogant at least, to believe that all of what I see within that very, very narrow bandwidth of acoustic and visual spectrum is all that there possibly could be, and to poo-poo and look down upon a more mystical tradition or a shamanic tradition, or someone that's able to operate in those other realms. And it's actually kind of refreshing in a way for you to so openly communicate about those spaces. And it's nice to kind of open up my westernized lens to that myself. So thank you.
The point is, from where I'm coming from, is you cannot understand the world of human without understanding that, because that's where it's coming from. That's where the manipulation is coming from.
How do you get this understanding? Where does this information come from for you specifically?
Well, first of all, I've been doing it for 35 years, and I've been doing it full time for 35 years, and I've traveled to, I think it's 60 odd countries in this period. I don't travel very far now because I'm banned from 30 European countries and Australia and lots of others if I try to get in.
Why are you banned from so many countries?
Because I'm apparently anti-Semitic. And I tell you what the great irony is I've been calling out not Jewish people. I've been calling out the Israeli government, which is, and Mossad and what have you, that is fundamentally an expression of this cult. I've been calling that out since 1995, 1994. And what they use as a defense mechanism is when you're calling out Netanyahu, what you're saying is all Jews are doing what he's doing. And that's not what they're saying. I'm saying. And I'll tell you the irony now. Not only am I banned from 30 European countries, and why 30 European countries? Because there is this ludicrous system in Europe called the Schengen border system. And all these different countries are part of the Schengen system. And if you're banned from one of them, you're banned from all of them. So I've been banned from the Netherlands, and as a result, I'm banned from 30 European countries. It's insane. And why am I banned from the Netherlands? Because I was asked by a Jewish man in 2022 to go to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam, and speak for 20 minutes, half an hour, at a peace rally. And then when it was circulated, and I've been and spoken in Amsterdam many times over the years without a problem, but when it was publicized that I was coming, all hell broke loose in the media, generated by an organization called City, which is a Zionist operation run by a man and a dog, but it has tremendous political influence. And so I was banned from going, and as a result was banned for 2 years. And we've challenged that in court, and the government lawyers have said, and they've now confirmed it by their actions, that if I don't change my views, not that they know what my views are, then the ban will be indefinite. And when the first 2-year ban ended, the new government, with a different party, a MAGA hero called Geert Wilders has the biggest party, and it was the minister from his party that said, we're going to ban him for another 2 years. So that's how ludicrous it is. And what they're doing is using the excuse made up to silence you for the things they really don't want people to circulate. But like I say, over the years, it's not just been that, but I've had endless events cancelled because I'm an anti-Semite. I'm calling out Netanyahu and the Israeli government. And people like the members of the UK Labour Party, etc., have campaigned to have my meetings cancelled because they believe in freedom of speech. And now those same people are going apeshit about what's happening in Gaza, and saying what they wanted me banned for saying since the mid 1990s. It's rather pathetic to watch, to be honest. So that's why I'm banned. And
Is it possible to I interrupted you when you were in the thick of what is adrenochrome? Why is it irrelevant? Who is it relevant for? What's the relevance of children for these people? Can you go back? Can we go back to that? I interrupted you about the they part, seeking specificity of they. Is it okay to go back to what is adrenochrome? Who is it relevant for?
the specificity of they, it's coming from this astral force, these astral entities, and there are representatives. This global cult represents and seeks to advance the agenda dictated by these astral entities. That's where you get the interaction in Satanism and what have you. And these a lot of these people, not least the royal families, but many others too, are hybrids. They're part human, part non-human, and they have joint energetic fields. And most of the time, the energetic field that you see is the human field, obviously. But what I've been told many times over the years by people who've taken part in these rituals is that when they're among, if you like, friends, when they're among safe people in a safe situation, they shift into something else, which is absolutely not human. And I've been told now since, the mid 1990s, over many times in different parts of the world, how people have sometimes seen this shift take place. It's called shapeshifting. So these people are not all human. In fact, the major bloodline families are not. And this is where you get royalty from. Why our royalty tried to, and aristocracy tried to retain a particular frequency, a particular bloodline, which is the frequency field in its base form. It's because they're different. And if you interbreed outside of that hybrid nature, then it soon starts to get diluted. And this is why you've had this whole process over the centuries of royalty interbreeding with each other, aristocracy breeding with each other, and why you get the so-called Eastern establishment families in the United States interbreeding with each other. It's to hold this particular bloodline, this particular genetic type, and that genetic type seems to like human blood, and particularly if it's infused with adrenochrome. So that's one level of it. But also, as has been explained to me, this adrenochrome is literally like a drug. Once you get hooked on it, you get hooked on it, and you want more. And so that's one of the reasons that they do it. But the foundation reason for the rituals is to feed the energy of terror to the entities in the astral realm, that overlook and oversee the ritual. And these rituals are not, every now and again. They're happening all the time. And this satanic calendar, as they call it, which includes Beltane and Halloween and many others, is real, and they follow it.
Are there specific people in the mainstream world that you know or believe to be shapeshifters or reptile people? And is reptile people appropriate language?
Well, they're hybrids. Yeah. Um, well, they're the Rothschilds would be hybrids for a start. And I've been told by people. I mean, I can't say shapeshifter or not. I can say it with Ted Heath because I've met people who's different people, unconnected, that have seen him shift. The former British Prime Minister, who was a rabid paedophile um, and murderer of children. I mean, extraordinary. Prime Minister of Britain. He was an MP for decades in the in Parliament, and I named him in a book called The Biggest Secret, that came out in 1998, for what he was doing. And the passage was read to him at the time by a journalist, and he was still a British member of Parliament. And he did nothing. He did nothing because it was true. And about 17 years later, after he died, there was a police force in Britain called Wiltshire Police that were that opened an investigation into Heath for paedophilia, and they said that if he was alive still, there was enough evidence to bring him for questioning. And the chief constable of that police force, who oversaw that and agreed that, didn't last long after that in terms of his job. But so there are people that I name in the Biggest Secret. But in terms of people that have been seen at the rituals, I remember I had a long correspondence way back with someone who said they were an unofficial Rothschild who were brought up on the Rothschild wine estate in France. And they told me about their experience of seeing people at rituals who later became very famous. And among them were Al Gore, they were Henry Kissinger, although they said he was back in the ritual, and Bill Clinton, Alan Greenspan. That's what he told me. And so, this satanic ring and the pedophile ring that connects with it is global. And if you, I mean, there are people. I mean, I won't name them now to protect others, but there's people in the Netherlands that are banned me who are very, very famous in Dutch society, who have been seen at the rituals by people who've attended as quote victims. And this the whole point is that whether it's in Australia, whether it's been in South Africa, whether it's been in European countries or Britain or Canada or America, the same stories with the same themes get repeated to you, and that's because it's a global network, and the world is just so different to what people are told it is. The nature of the reality of the world and how we interact with it and what the world is, and the illusory nature of physicality is is fantastic enough. But then you get into these famous people who butter wouldn't melt in the public arena, who are involved in this horror behind the scenes.
Is the way to work with these energies, is it more of an internal game? Is it something to work within the self? Or is there like, what can a person do with this information that actually creates value in their day-to-day life outside of just injecting more fear and more sense of uncertainty?
Well, in terms of fear, fear is like being offended. It's a choice. You can choose to be offended, or you can choose not to be. I choose not to be. I don't know what it's like to feel offended, because I just say what you like and care less. I make that choice. And in terms of fear, you can look at this information as something to fear, or you can look at it as being empowered to understand how the world really works, and thus to cease to be have your perceptions of it manipulated and downloaded by someone else. And I talk about so many different subjects because they all interconnect, and people sometimes often say to me on things like X, you never have solutions. Well, my books are full of solutions, but people don't want them, because the reason they don't want them, well, some people do, but I mean, the reason most people don't want them is because they don't want solutions that don't involve someone else doing it. If it involves them doing it, that's not a solution to them. So this is where the Trumps of this world prosper from that mentality, because they're seen as saviors. Someone else is going to do it for us. And so what are these solutions? I mean, there's so many aspects to this. We just scratched the surface, and we talk for another 2 hours. We still scratch the surface. But the biggest perceptual trap that people are locked into is they are living a fake self-identity. A self-identity that is ingrained in them from cradle to grave. And that identity is basically one of two things. Well, the two are, in many ways connected. One is, I am human. No, you're not. You're having a brief human experience. Your I is consciousness. Your consciousness is eternal. It is potentially infinitely eternal. And the other one is that I am human, and I'm watched over in every last thing I do by a God. And I must not displease God. I must please God. I must fear God. I must be God-fearing. And then I'll be judged on one life on earth, no matter what the circumstances in the background, on what happens to me after that. And those, first of all, the second one is complete subordination. Me down here, God up there. And the other one that doesn't involve religion says, I'm just a cosmic accident, and I'm here for a few years, and then I disappear. Either way, it's a false self-identity. You are consciousness. And the more your self-identity is myopic, i.e., I'm just a cosmic accident, pretty pointless, this life, really. Or I'm subordinate to a god, the more your perceptions of self are myopic. As your self identity is limited, so the level of awareness, knowledge, insight, inspiration, intuition is subsequently squeezed. So you create self-fulfilling prophecies. A perception of self-identity that says, I'm just little me, I have no power, will live a life in which they will have no power, not because they have none, but because they believe they don't. And, you know, once you start to expand your self-identity from I am human to I am awareness, ultimately infinite awareness, having a brief experience as a human through this biological computer I call the body. As your self-identity expands, so does your consciousness expand deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into levels of insight, awareness, intuition, inspiration that are beyond the levels of suppression and beyond the levels of manipulation. And that's true awakening. See, what's happening in so much of the so-called alternative media, because not least of this, here but no further, it's politics and that's it, is people have moved from the prison cell, and the prison cell has slightly widened. Oh, there's a conspiracy going on, and it's the Democrats. And so it's not going to change anything. But as you go on with the awakening, and it's like taking energetic levels of programming off and deleting them like onion skins, you're accessing more and more expansive levels of awareness. And suddenly you can now start to see what's going on. You can see how the dots connect because you're not there anymore. You're expanding. And I've always worked on this principle that was articulated, it is said, by Socrates in ancient Greece, which is that wisdom is knowing how little we know. To know is to know you know nothing. The one thing we know for sure, probably is only one thing, that is without question, is that whatever we know or think we know, there's always more to know. And so what you're always doing is saying, okay, I think I got this, but what don't I know? And that takes you deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, or use another analogy, deeper and deeper and deeper into the expansion of energetic consciousness field. And you start to see things that others can't see, not because you're better than them or anything more than them, but because they have a different self-identity to you, and therefore they have a different perception of reality to you. And this is the true awakening. It's when you start to realize that the whole of this human society is an illusion. It's Maya, as the Buddhists talk about. It is, and you know, I'm not, and I don't follow any ism, but it's all a trap. It's a perceptual trap.
It's a trap if you believe it. If you believe it to be real.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think don't the Buddhists have a saying, "As seen, so it is," or words to that effect. We perceive things from our perceptions, And so if you can control people's perceptions, you're actually dictating how they see things. So, for instance, if you can squeeze their sense of the possible, then they will dismiss things that are actually happening because to you they're not possible. As it appears, as your consciousness state is, so things appear. And I've noticed that in my own kind of journey over the decades, where the more you free yourself from the onion rings of programming, the more you can see. And, people say, the more I know, the more I realize there is to know. And that's true. But my experience is that the more you know, the simpler it gets. Because in so many ways, it's complexity that hides the simple. For me, genius is not seeing is not understanding the complex. It's seeing the simple hidden by the complex. So if you look at, you can see some of them on the internet. You see these physicists and stuff, and they're standing in front of these blackboards, massive blackboards with all these bloody equations on them. And it's like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, what? And yet you break it down. What you think you are, you will be. How you think something is, you will see. And the more that I've looked into this whole arena of quantum physics, just finished another book where I put a lot of this stuff in, the more it's obvious that literally our perceptions are rearranging reality on the quantum level to put our perceptions in front of us. So, they say 95% of human behavior and reaction comes from the subconscious. And so people say, well, how do I know what's happening in my subconscious? And what I say is, look at your life. Look at your life, and it will tell you what's going on. What is it about your life that you don't like? Why do you react to certain things and not others? Because there are programs in your subconscious, maybe through experience, maybe externally downloaded, that are manifesting themselves as what you call your life. People. One of the things that I've observed over the years, I guess because I was one once, is professional football and football games, sporting events in general, because you see constantly how perception creates reality. You'll have a football team, and they're getting absolutely hammered by the other team. Maybe they're 2 goals down already, and they're getting slaughtered. And then they pull a lucky goal back against all the run of play. And suddenly, they're a different team. All they've got is a lucky goal. They haven't become better footballers because they got a lucky goal. That has changed. Hey, we got a chance here. We scored. And it dramatically changes the game and can. Because the perception has changed, not anything else. And so much sporting performance is actually psychological, and sport is a wonderful way of seeing all the time how perception creates reality. And we're doing it all the time. And this is part of a much bigger picture, because it just goes on getting deeper. But the deeper you go, the more you understand, the more you see the answers. What they're doing, and say they, I mean these astral entities, they understand how this works. Of course they do. They just don't want us to know. So they know that our perceptions create reality. So what are they doing? They're manipulating our perceptions because they know that
narrowing our bandwidth.
They know that collectively we will then create an expression of that sense of reality as an experienced reality, and it's the reality they want. This is what they call preemptive programming is about, where they're putting out movies and television series and what have you that are portraying a certain dystopian kind of future. This is why in the books and when I'm talking, I emphasize, look, this is what is planned, but it doesn't have to happen. It will only happen if nothing changes in terms of our perceptions of reality, because we're creating it. So that they put all these dystopian themes out in movies and television series, like I say, and they are basically downloading a sense of reality, and we'll then create it. They're using this mechanism of we create our own reality from our perception of reality to create the world that they want to manifest. We are creating it, which is great news because it means that we can stop creating it. And fundamental to that is to understand our true nature. We are consciousness. We are an expression of infinite awareness, having a brief human experience, but we're cut off from that level of awareness, so we're operating on a fraction of the true self. And notice in religion, which is one of the greatest forms of mind control ever invented, in terms of limiting people into myopia, you say that I am an expression of, quote, God, and you're a blasphemer. You are flouting God's name. The whole thing is set up that to say I'm an expression of all that is blasphemous. You can't say that. No. What will God think? I don't know. I'll tell you. Because I'm an expression of it, like you are, like everyone is, if you only realized it. So the biggest level of this conspiracy from these astral entities is to disconnect incarnate awareness from their infinite awareness. That's what it's all about. And this move to connect the human brain awareness to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind, is to complete that process of disconnecting incarnate self from infinite self. Because once your mind is thinking what AI is thinking, you ain't gonna ask, who am I? Where am I? What is this place? You're not going to ask those questions. You're just going to be a slave on a scale never before seen in known human history. And that's the idea. And if people think that's fantastic and that's all just ridiculous, well, they're telling us that that's what they're doing. This guy, Ray Kurzweil at Google, the so-called futurist, has written all these books about AI. He's saying that, it's said a few years ago now, that by 2030, and it's already happening, humans will be connected to artificial intelligence. And in his words, artificial intelligence will then do more and more of human thinking until human thinking is basically negligible, deleted, it means. And that artificial intelligence that suddenly turns humans into a computer terminal is not going to ask big questions. And so, we are in a period where it's not just nice to awaken. It's absolutely bloody essential. And the key thing is to awaken to your true self, because everything changes then. Everything changes then.
The perception, is it okay that if I ask another question? I know that we're past the time. Are you still okay? Are you still okay on time right now?
Yeah,
is it okay if I ask?
Be all right. Yeah.
All right. So in the illusion that I exist in my own simulation, or the thing that I call mine, I tend to believe that all things go back to love. And if we are going through some type of pain or perceived trauma or contraction or something of the sort, it is life working itself out in a perfect way to go back towards the heart and back towards love. From your perception, do you see us going so deep down a dystopian path that perhaps the path towards love or God or whatever language you like to apply to it is self-destruction of all things, and we are so far lost that is the most loving thing, is such dystopian that humanity dies off and we become cyborg robot AI creatures? Do you have a belief that love or some type of lighter energy outside of like dark forces is at the root of things, or is that?
No, listen, I've been writing since I started this in 1990, consciously anyway. It was going on before that, I now see. That beyond, see, what I'm saying is that this human reality is a simulation. And it's like a digital simulation. It's a frequency digital simulation. And it's designed to hijack back again our perception of self and reality, because then they got you. But beyond it is infinity, nothing like this. And that is where love and wisdom reigns. And so the idea is to so focus our attention on the five senses which interact with this simulation, like a headset interacts with a virtual reality game, that our attention is held in the simulation. Our sense of self identity is held in the simulation. And this is why awakening to the true self, the true nature of self, the formless consciousness self, is the way out of here. Because it's then that you start to tap in to those levels that of reality that are beyond this simulation, which is not very big. And that's when you start getting the inspiration and the knowledge and the awareness and the foresight, and you see things. It's because you're tapping into that level that can see it. And what we call love, wisdom, is the way to connect to that level, which is love and wisdom. Quite obviously, it's a frequency connection. But, then you ask, what is love? People have lost on purpose. It's been ingrained what love means. Love is physical attraction, which is not the same thing. It can be the same thing as well as a much greater level of love, or it can't be. I mean, you have people physically attracted to people, and once that physical attraction starts to fade, they're off. So love is, you have to use words like unconditional love to try to get somewhere close to what you're talking about. But love is not necessarily doing everything that people want. Like, you bring up kids and you give them everything they want. and you're bringing up kids in an imbalanced way, and they go out into the world when they leave your nest, and the world has them for breakfast, dinner, and tea because the world's different. So the more that you can bring up children in a balanced way and not necessarily give them everything they want, then you're preparing them to be much more streetwise and able to cope with the world when they go out into it. You got helicopter parents, as they call them, I think, in America, where they're always running around after their kids, giving them everything they want, doing everything that everything for them and stuff like that. And it's a tremendous imbalance. And now they'll perceive that as I'm just giving love to my kids. But what is love? Sometimes love, in its true sense, is telling people what they don't want to hear, because you believe out of love that they need to hear it. And those people can come back at you and abuse you and ridicule you and laugh at you, but you still keep doing it because of this love, this desire to free them from what has entrapped them. And of course, it's their right to reject it, but you still keep doing it. That's why I've been doing it for 35 years. I don't have to do this anymore. I'm 73. I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to go on writing the books. I don't have to go on doing the research. I don't have to go on doing any of it. But I'll do it to the day I keel over. I will, because I believe it's right to do that. And I want as many people as possible to just reevaluate their self-identity and realize that actually they're more than they think they are. And that's the doorway to freedom, is realizing that we've been living what I call a phantom self all our lives. We've been living a fake version of who we are, and we've confused and been encouraged to confuse an experience, brief experience, with who we are, and that's the trap in the end. And if you look at the consequences of myopic self-identity, that's what leads to people not questioning authority, because authority knows best, because I don't know anything, I'm just little me, I am. And others that are saying, oh dear, no, you can't say no to authority. I don't care if it's true or not. I've got to do it. And what happens when you start to expand beyond that into more and more of the true self? Then you start to question everything, because you start to see, hey, this is not what it used to look like. And you also will not have anyone else telling you what to do if you don't believe that what they're telling you is valid. You won't. That's why throughout COVID, I never wore a mask and never social distanced and ignored their bloody lockdowns, because, I could see it was a nonsense. And it's proved.
Yeah, we were in the same camp on that. I really appreciate you. I didn't anticipate this going into such a introspective, metaphysical, psycho-spiritual direction, but I'm really glad that it did. I really appreciate.
Well, that's how I got into this whole arena, was to pursue the nature of reality and the nature of self. all this stuff that I do and I've done and continue to do about the nuts and bolts and structure of the control is because I feel people need to know that to see why they've been living a lie and they've been living a fake self-identity. It's because they've been manipulated to do that for specific reasons. So I deal with the reasons, and I deal with the dots and the details of how human society is controlled. But it's all for the real reason, which is if you understand why, I can see it now, why I believed that I was someone I'm not. While I believed in this phantom self, I can see how I've been manipulated. I can see how it works. When people can see how something came about, they can start to say, so if I'm not that, what am I? And so everything I do, although people may not see that when I'm talking about Satanism and cults and all the rest of it, and Trump and all that, the other bloody mob, they might not see it, but it's all for a spiritual reason to open the door to, hey, you're not who you think you are. You are vastly, vastly, infinitely more than you ever believed you were, because these people want you to believe in myopia because then they can control you. So everything is focused on that. And what I love talking about is that, but I have to talk about the other stuff because it's part of the, if you like, the deprogramming of what's been downloaded to us.
This felt like an incredibly empowering conversation, which was not my expectation. And the feeling, Ram Dass has a quote. He says, the greatest thing you can do for me is work on yourself, and the greatest thing I can do for you is work on myself. And it feels to me like closing this conversation, it feels just like an invitation to yourself. And maybe you're not just your social security number. Maybe you're not just your profession. Maybe you're not the story of this avatar that's very convenient to move you through this, three-dimensional plane. And perhaps there's something more to you, is the invitation. And that's really exciting to me. So thank you so much for being here. Is there anything where would be the best place to point people to go deeper into your work or just into the world where it would be good to leave people from here?
There's davidicke.com. That's my website, where you can get my books and I've just done a reality trilogy, I call it, The Trap, The Dream, and The Reveal. That trilogy is all about not totally all about, because I bring a few other things in as well, but overwhelmingly it's about the nature of reality, the nature of self, and how we, free ourselves from this nonsense by that realization. We have a media platform called Icke, where my son's a big part of that, but I've done a series of documentaries about the nature of reality, because, like I say, that's my passion. The nature of self, the nature of reality, who we really are. That's my passion. The rest of it I do because I feel it needs to be done. And so on Icke, you find a lot of full-length films I've done about this very subject.
Well, my avatar in this conversation appreciates meeting your avatar and enjoyed getting to feel into what feels like some layers behind that too. So thank you for being here, man.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. As all, I'll see you next week.